Hey, welcome back to another Get Geekish podcast. I am Bino, joined by my cohort, compatriot, whatever you call him. Derek is over there. Say hi, Derek.
Hey, cohort was always a weird word. Cohort?
My cohort.
I mean, yeah. Anyway.
$2.99 a minute. Thanks for joining us again. As always, we do this mostly every week. It's been a little while because I've been slacking and doing a lot of stuff with cons and making cosplay videos. But we want to talk a little bit. We both have the kids of age that are starting to, have a sense of reason, and you can't just make up stuff and they believe everything you say now. So we got us talking about the list of some of those things that our parents told us that were complete BS now that we're adults.
Parentisms, if you will.
Parentisms. What was the first one that got you going on this path of questioning?
So it's funny. It's like, we were driving recently, and it was one of those ones where the kid turned on the overhead light, right? And growing up in the 90s and the 80s, that was always a huge taboo. Do not turn on the overhead light. You'll get arrested. You'll get pulled over. And it's funny because I don't really think it's that big of a deal. I mean, yeah, it kind of like might distract you, but I don't know. Was it the same for you? Because I know there's a few other people that I talked to where it's, if you turn on that light, it's like the cops automatically know that that's on. Like, because as a kid on a road trip, you probably turned it on. I turned it on, and it was one of those quick, like, turn that off. And I was like, oh my gosh, what's going on?
Yeah, I remember my parents, we'd have it on there, and we could turn it on to find some, because if it was on for more than like 10 seconds, it was, you're going to get us pulled over, turn that light off. It was like putting the fear of God into you over it. Mm-hmm. And it's not illegal. I mean, it can be distracting, and it can maybe cause an accident that could be an issue for it, but there's not a cop on the planet that's going to pull you over like, hey, I pulled you over. Kid had the dome light on in the back. It's 3 points there, sir. Like, and
I don't.
Because of that, we've tried to be very clear with our little one. Though I don't like it when they don't, because when you're driving, it is kind of a pain, that bright light. Like, hey, car manufacturers, when you put those lights in the back, why is the dome light like the brightest thing in the rearview mirror? Like, could you just move that around a little bit? But that's a whole nother story. We always tell them it's annoying. So can you turn it off? But trying to make up the story of it's illegal, I don't understand why our parents did that.
I'm wondering too. Like, looking back, I did leave the dome light on a few times, and it's always one of those ones where, like, if you click it on and they shut the doors, you just think the car's automatically going to just turn it off, because like that's how it usually goes. If the dome light comes on with the doors open, you close, it stays on for a little bit, shuts off. But if the kid's messing with it, and the 90s cars and the 80s cars didn't have great batteries, you get up the next morning and you go click, 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 click.
I think a lot of younger generations don't realize that with the car now. I could leave the interior lights in my car on all night and go out in the next morning and be like, oh man, my lights are on, hope everything's okay, and everything's going to be just fine. Yeah. But you had, like, before, some of those lights, we had an old Volkswagen van, and if you left the interior light on the passenger back door on, you had about 4 to 8 hours and the entire car battery would be dead. Like, they just used a ton of juice. They didn't have LED technology. It was like running a 100-watt halogen in the back there.
So that brings us to the next one is, I don't know about you, but like growing up, I'm kind of that way now with this, but the turn off the lights. If you're not in the room, turn off the lights. Because in my head as a kid, I was like, oh man, they made it sound like electricity was running out or something. Like, we all know the state of the world now, and as a grown-up, I know that electricity is not cheap, and if it's running all the time, especially in the summer with the AC. But growing up, I didn't have AC. Grew up in the country and little thing, we had the windows open, but like it was always one of those ones where it's like, turn off your lights. And it's funny now because I'm becoming my parents that way, where like my daughter will leave the room, I'm like, hey, if you're not in your room, turn off the light. But it was one of those ones growing up, I was just like,
I'm still that too, but I still buy into the fact that, yes, it's not because if you leave your light on, an electric bill is going to go. I think that was the lie our parents told us, that if you leave your bedroom light on when we go to the store, then our electric bill is going to be $100 more this month.
Right.
But it's you leave the light on now, one, it does waste some electricity, although a lot less than it used to. It also makes the light bulb not last as long, because if you leave your light bulb on every day, then you got to replace those light bulbs 10 times as often.
Yep.
And when something's on, there's the more chance of if there was ever a short circuit or wire or one of those freak accident fires, then there's that kind of idea. So there's still some merit to it, but yeah, you're not like Captain Planet saving the world because your lights aren't on for an extra hour during the day.
Speaking of that, I was sitting here. I just realized I was sitting in the dark. I was like, oh, I got to turn on a light. So there we go. You reminded me.
Speaking of the dark, how about the next one I got on my list is don't read in the dark. It's going to ruin your eyes.
Tie that one to the sitting too close to the TV as well.
Mm-hmm. That was the thing. When you were a young teenager, what you want to do? You want to go read under a blanket in your room before bed, or you want to turn the light out and watch TV in the dark and sit up close to it? Mm-hmm. And our parents would have none of it. Making up stories. If you read in the dark without lights on, you're going to go blind. And I was in college before I realized that was not the truth. And they've done actual doctors and scientists have done studies on it, and it can be tiresome to read in the dark and cause some eye strain and might give you a bit of a headache, but it can't actually read to your eyes going bad in the dark.
and the whole myth of sitting too close to the TV, I'm pretty sure we covered this one in another podcast, but it's maybe back in the day with like the tube TVs, there was something different, but like the way the TVs are now, like you can feel a difference, because I don't know about you, but I could still feel what it feels like to sit next to that tube TV, and you're sitting there, this far away, and you can like feel the heat radiating off of it. You can hear the hum, and now if you go like to a flat screen and everything, you're just sitting there, you're like, the same feet away, you're like, huh.
Well, you also have people with phones, and you're sitting there doing this half the time, staring at your phone, holding it in front of your nose.
That's true.
I wonder is because they said sitting too close to TV is going to make you go blind, and they just was an excuse because they didn't want you watching as much TV. Mm-hmm. But flashback to the 50s and 60s, some of those TVs were flat out blasting radiation out the front, so maybe sitting back from the TV was the eyes was the lie of not saying, hey, you might get radiation poisoning and die of cancer, son. Like,
right. Don't sit too close to the TV, you might get a third arm.
Same thing, the old microwaves like that. Like, we're going to put our dinner in the microwave, but make sure you stand back 5 or 6 feet when it turns on, because that radiation is not safe.
What?
So you're cooking our dinner in there?
I mean, there was a lot of things that came from back then. I mean, not necessarily
lead paint.
Yep, not necessarily my parents, but the generation before them of not trusting banks because of the Depression and everything like that. I get it, and hiding their money in random places, and then all of a sudden they're just like 90 something on their deathbed going, somewhere in the backyard. Good luck.
There's a floor joist at the cabin. It's kind of loose, but there's some good stuff hidden in there. All right, how about this one? Cracking the old knuckles. Used to drive family members nuts. Just crack the knuckles. Mm-hmm. What'd they say? Don't do that. It's going to give you arthritis. It's going to make... the story I always got was if you crack your knuckles, that's how your knuckles got big. So you'd get those big knuckles and arthritis if you cracked your knuckles all the time.
I always got the arthritis.
So what did that make 12-year-old me do? Sit in class and crack my knuckles all day, hoping I could make my knuckles bigger.
You wanted to be the Hulk?
This much of me's the Hulk. Arr! You won't like me when I'm bored. But yeah, you look at the science of what it is. Cracking is not actually bones or joints. It's the fluid when you're moving those joints together, filling the spaces when you move it out of the way. Like when you're smacking, you take something, a towel and whip it together. It's the same kind of thing. Things just snapping into place so it doesn't cause any damage or weakness to any joints. Just annoys people and creeps some people out,
Yeah, some people, I get it. They have their pet peeves, and things that make them go ew, and I've definitely met a few people like that.
Now, flashback to when you were a kid. What happens when you say, "Uh-oh, sorry, Mom, I think I swallowed my gum."
7 years.
Mm-hmm. That's gonna be stuck in your stomach for 7 years. Don't do it.
False.
Horse hooey.
That's not how digestion works. And I don't know why, even going through biology, that never clicked until like I was in my 20s. I was like, wait a minute.
I mean, interesting that people get weird about swallowing things like that, but gum is pretty much indigestible. I mean, some gum is made out of the same basic rubber that's in inner tubes.
Yeah.
It just goes through goes in one end, goes out the other. Just like anything else does, and it's malleable, so it can change shape. The only problem is if like you swallow a entire case of bubble tape, maybe you got a problem because it's going to get stuck on the way down. Oof. But
what was that one gum that you chewed it, and as soon as you chewed it, it started just disintegrating in your mouth?
Was it the Icebreakers?
Was it? I don't know. Yeah, maybe. There was. I remember there was one gum.
Or
I was
the Topps trading card gum.
Could have been that too. I remember there was one that was like, oh, this tastes great, and then also it just kind of like turns into paper and just disintegrates your mouth. You're like,
Maybe the flavor makes me think of fruit stripe gum. But
yeah, fruit stripe gum is great for 5 seconds.
No wonder if it get two at a time, you get a good 12 to 15 seconds of flavor goodness.
Yeah, no wonder the packs of gum, those gum were so cheap back in the day. Go through a pack in 5 minutes.
Now, here's one that I never got, and my parents would have ridiculed anybody that said this was a myth. However, a lot of parents told their kids as a fun joke that chocolate milk comes from brown cows.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that, and I think in elementary school I had some kids that believed that.
Well, this website, according to a blog on cheapism, a study found that 7% of adults in the United States, that's over 17 million grown-ups in our country, still believe chocolate milk comes from brown cows. This is why we can't have nice things. This is why you don't lie to your children. They believe you.
Have they never had chocolate milk and seen it made?
Well, there's the same people that probably think they're ordering their organic bull's milk too, but it's a little zesty. Big one in the 80s. I know we've talked about this in podcasts before. If you cross your eyes or make a funny face, it's going to stick that way. Somebody slaps you on the back, your face is going to get stuck. I think it was like Summer Rental. It's a John Cusack movie that had that happen and a few other times for it. And like, why make up the excuse? Why tell your kids, if you cross your eyes, they're going to stay that way? Why don't you just say, don't cross your eyes, it's rude?
Or
you look ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, and the whole thing about being a kid too is being goofy. So you're gonna sit there and walk around and do goofy faces and stuff like that. So it's always funny to maybe say, hey, don't make that face to people. But if you wanna do it to yourself or just see yourself in the mirror, then that's fine. But
and again, the same kid. I can't be the only kid that when somebody said if you make that face, it's going to stay. Did you ever sit there in the mirror and just like hold the nasty face to see if you could make it stick or see if it would just stay even for a little while?
I was going to say I'm a poster child for that being a myth because, man, I did so many goofy faces as a kid. Now, I will say that I have a permanent eye roll that I can't hide that I do subconsciously, but I don't know if that came from being a kid or not.
Well, I have fairly expressive eyebrows, and I can wiggle my ears, but that's all learned.
Yeah, you self-taught yourself.
Yeah, I sat in front of a mirror and wanted to wiggle my ears, so I figured out that if I smiled really, really big, like a big old poo-eating grin ear to ear, my ears would move up a little bit. So I sit in the mirror, and I would just do that over and over again, and then I would start doing it with, like, hold my cheeks down to my ears until I could practice getting those muscles back. Oh, I can move my ears now. Oh, hey, I got that. It took, hours a night for a few weeks before I could just do it a little bit, and then now it's fine. But if those, oh yeah, I do it right now, but I have headphones on. I realized I was actually trying to. I'm like, no,
I know you're all. Yeah.
I swear they're just like flapping like Dumbo right now. Watermelon seeds. Do you ever try and grow one of those in your stomach?
Who didn't?
Why was that a thing? Why did every parent in our generation of us tell kids, if you swallow watermelon seeds, you're going to grow a watermelon plant in your stomach?
Or pumpkin seeds. Mm-hmm. I mean, any kind of seeds, really. I mean, that and the Pop Rocks and soda. Granted, out of some of these urban myths, we got that crappy horror movie and a sequel, I think. But that's another thing is like Pop Rocks and sodas. I think that evolved into Mentos because Pop Rocks are far and few between now. But
what happens if you chug a bottle of Coke and then swallow some Mentos? bad things?
Or vice versa. I don't know. I mean, you'd have to swallow the Mentos whole, right? I'm
Yeah,
assuming
that's
you
not a
just
problem.
get. I'm assuming you just get gassy. I don't know if you turn into Mount Vesuvius or not, but
I kind of want to figure that out. But yeah, the Pop Rocks and Coke, that was a thing. People get like, well, don't drink eat the Pop Rocks and the Coke. It's going to explode in your stomach.
yeah. No. I mean, I look back to a lot of things. Growing up, it's one of those ones where you go through being a kid and a teenager, and you like look at some of the stuff your parents say, and you're just like, yeah, whatever. And then as you become a parent yourself, you look back and you hear your safe saying, like, you gotta trust the water, you gotta save some for the whales, stuff like that. You're like, that's not how that works.
Why weren't you allowed to touch toads as a kid?
Warts.
Mm-hmm. You touch toads, you get warts.
That one's fake?
Well,
damn, I'm in my 30s and figured.
Yeah, warts are caused by a virus. It's a human virus, so you're not going to get warts from a frog. Some of them do have toxins that can be hallucinogenic or fatal, and a bunch of them have like bacteria and parasites on their skin that can be gross and do some nasty stuff to you, but you're not going to get warts from touching a frog. You might die, you might start seeing through walls, or you might get really, really, really sick, but you're not going to get warts.
That's the least of your worry. Well, it's always funny, too. You go to the petting zoo, and, growing up, I had turtles. And I know that if you touch a turtle, you need to wash your hands afterwards because you can get salmonella from it and everything like that. And I see kids at the petting zoos, like, touching the turtles and everything like that. I'm like, go wash your hands.
Well, same thing with lizards. I realized that with, like, chameleons and bearded dragons and stuff like that. They're like, oh, you can get all kinds of nasty stuff. Like, I had lizards growing up. I never once washed my hands.
That explains a lot.
They were lizards. They were just clean little things. They pooed in the rock in the corner. That's all I had to worry about.
They look clean.
Exactly. And there's the perennial, the Santa Claus lie that goes around for a lot of kids, which is, I can see the fun in that one. I feel like some parents take it a little too seriously.
That one and the Tooth Fairy. Actually, my wife and I were just talking about the Tooth Fairy one today. Of just like Santa Claus, Tooth Fairy, Easter Bunny, blah blah blah. They all have ties to rituals that date hundreds or if not thousands of years, right? But the Tooth Fairy is always one that's just, it's creepy, and I don't know why. As a kid, you're like, somebody's gonna collect my teeth. Oh, fun! I'd be like, I should have been like, what now? They want this?
Yeah, let's be honest. The Tooth Fairy wanted teeth. They could get a lot more teeth if they just brought a hammer.
Right? or if they went in, if the dentist went in cahoots with them, or, they went in cahoots with the candy companies. It's one, like, looking back at it now going, the Tooth Fairy is creepy. Giving me a quarter?
I'll give you the parent act we gave to the Santa Claus one, too, thing for it. We basically, well, as soon as you stop believing in Santa Claus, he stops bringing you presents.
Oh.
Because then you can have the kind of, you can have the actual conversation, but you can still make it fun and like, oh, yeah, it's here. It's not like, because we tried to do that lower because I never wanted to be that my parents lied to me. This was the second, like, ours ever had the, tell me the truth. Is there Santa Claus? It's like, well, here it is. Okay, we're in kindergarten. This is done now because I'm not going to lie. Like, it's fun to pretend. I'm not going to sit there and spend half of your elementary school, like, feeding you this, blowing smoke up your backside. Like, oh, yeah, I was just kidding about that. Sorry. And why do we use things like Santa Claus, Easter Bunny as, like, our police enforcers, our KGB?
I was going to say that's another thing, too, is you look back at he's always watching, he knows when you're sleeping, knows when you're awake. That, like, as a kid, you're just like, but as an adult, you're like, creep?
Like, Robert Stack did TV specials about people that do that. Like, you want some creepy old man watching everything you do, telling if you've been naughty or nice, then maybe that's not, maybe you should find another moral compass to hang your hat on. Like,
the KGB always knows. I don't know. Like, again, that's, dated way back, the tradition goes, and I don't know how, because I'm pretty sure it didn't, back when Santa started, it didn't turn into a...
Back when Santa started.
Yeah, the myth or whatever, it didn't turn into, he's always watching you, and I wonder when that came about. because it's the thing is like just.
Didn't we talk about that in our history of Christmas?
I think we
years
did
ago when it started from the Krampus thing of they're telling stories to scare kids from going out at night or being good, and then it turned into, instead of killing and eating kids, he brought them presents. Like it was just that positive affirmation instead of the fear. I don't know.
Well, that's another thing too. Is like with the boogeyman or whatnot. The whole moral compass of like, don't do bad stuff or else they'll know. You're like, there's got to be an easier way than threatening the boogeyman.
Let's see. We'll blast through a few more of these since we're getting low on time here. Sneezing with your eyes open. Don't do it. Your eyes will pop out of your head.
It hurts. It doesn't feel great.
Blood pressure behind your eyes increases slightly, but there's nowhere near enough pressure to actually cause them to come out of your head at all.
What about this one? Hold on. Before we run out of time, we got to talk about the granddaddy of them all. I feel like everybody's parent did this. And that's when you're driving in the city, you turn down the radio so you don't get lost. Did your parents ever do that?
No, my parents didn't listen to music loud enough for that to be a problem.
Okay. Or like if you're talking like, shh, I gotta focus. Like I remember being a kid and like when my parents, we were going to the zoo or something in Denver, and I remember like my dad sitting here driving around and like turns the music down. I'm like, why is the music getting done? They're like, shh, we gotta focus. Because that was back before you had navigation. You had a big paper map that you had to rely on. I mean, this was even before MapQuest. So
see, I can understand because I've been in that situation too. When you're trying to figure something out and you're in a city and you're like, okay, I'm supposed to turn on North Broadway. There's South Broadway. There's three. Blah 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 blah. Shut up for a minute. I need to turn left here.
I missed my turn. See, it's not a myth, but it's a parentism that I feel like everybody's parent did at one point, and I have found myself kind of doing it, where I'm sitting here driving, and I'm like trying to look for something, and it's one of those focus things I turned down, and I caught myself. I was like, did I just turn that down? Who have I become?
Yeah, it happens. It's just a little focus. There's the old lie about coffee stunting growth. That's why parents wouldn't let their kids have coffee. I do it. Okay. I got too much caffeine. It's gonna stunt your growth. It's not true. Doesn't do anything to stunt growth. Over-caffeinated kids have other problems of not being able to sleep and being hyper and things like that, but it's not going to stunt their growth at all.
Right.
Carrots giving you superpowers, basically.
That was a myth started by the British in World War II.
Mm-hmm. If you eat carrots, it's going to make your eyes better. You're going to see in the dark better. They're good for eye health. Yeah, that's true, but not seeing the dark. Eye health does not mean seeing in the dark.
Right. That was a myth to trick Nazis, so there you go. And they fell for it.
There's some other lies I've heard that would just seem flat out mean, looking through some of the lists of some of these other ones that are on there of, if you pee in the pool, the water will turn red. I heard that one, never from my parents, but I heard that one a lot.
Isn't there a chemical in the pool that will detect that?
They have chemicals that can do it, but there's not a pool I've ever seen in my entire life that would actually have enough of that to be in there. Because if there's enough of that chemical, that's a whole other problem to get with. We'll say there's enough chlorine to turn your hair white and kill any bacteria. So you don't have to worry about a little bit of pee. That's the scary part. If I don't have the science to back it up, but this is what I learned when I was a lifeguard, so I'm assuming it was true. You get in water, and sometimes there's too much chlorine in the pool. My eyes are burning. You know what that is? It's not the chlorine. What? There's too much ammonia in the water, and it's burning your eyes. Yeah. And you know where ammonia comes from. Uh-huh. Don't open your eyes in the kiddie pool.
On that note,
somebody fact check me on that one, but that's what I always knew about. But yeah, it's a good one to end
I mean, there's times where you go to the pool and you could smell like it smells like it's just a bleach factory, right? Mm-hmm. And I'd get out and like my eyes would be like red and hurty, and if that's true, oh God, I had pee eyes. You're in trouble.
Well, so what did we miss? We just ran through probably, 20 or 30 different myths that our parents told us that were actual malarkey. So what are the ones we missed? Let us know in the comments at Get Geekish, or chime in on ones we already mentioned. But what's something that your parents told you when you were a kid that was absolute zero truth to it, but they used it to control you?
I'm curious because there's probably a lot of like little quirks that people's parents had, and I'm excited to see. I mean, growing up, it was always like if you watch an R-rated movie and there's just a sexy time scene in it, they fast forward through it, and as a kid, you're like, what? And like you said, as a kid, that makes you want to watch it more. You're like,
yeah, you sneak out at 11 o'clock and I grab the tape and go rewind it and watch it in slow-mo. You're like, what was this all about? Ooh. This is way better when it's not scrambled.
oh my god. Yeah. So let's know what kind of quirks you had from your parents growing up, and I'm sure there's some good ones out there. I know it.
Yeah, love to hear it. Get Geekish, and Derek, fun as always. Thanks again for listening to us and our rambling, and we will talk at you next week.
Adios.
Hey, thanks for listening. We truly appreciate it. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast. Find us on social media at Get Geekish, and if you want more podcasts, we got plenty of them.